Hi, this is Ronn Sutton. I'm the illustrator on Carson of Venus for Edgar Rice Burroughs Incorporated, and you're listening to True North Country Comics Podcast.
Welcome to the True North Country Comics Podcast, dedicated to promote Canadian comic book and graphic novel creators and supporters. I'm John Swinimer. On this episode, I chat with Ronn Sutton about drawing his 200th episode of Carson of Venus and more. Please like and subscribe to this website by hitting the subscribe button so you'll be notified about new podcast interviews and article posts. This podcast is available wherever podcasts are enjoyed. Please like, follow, and subscribe. Ronn is an illustrator and comic book artist based in Ottawa, Ontario, who has drawn several hundred comic books over the past 4 decades. This includes a 9-year stint illustrating nearly 50 issues of Elvira, Mistress of the Dark for Claypool Comics from 1998 to 2006. Among his many accolades, Ronn has been honored with the Aurora Award nominations for Best Artist and Joe Shuster Award nomination for Best Webcomic Digital Comic. In 2022, Ronn was inducted into the Joe Shuster Awards Hall of Fame. Ronn's recent work includes the Frankenstein Visions art book, regular comic book creator magazine portraits, and more. Ronn is currently drawing the webcomic adaptation of Edgar Rice Burroughs' Carson of Venus and celebrating his 200th episode. Carson of Venus is a story of Carson Napier, adventurer on Earth's neighbor world, discovers that he's been tricked into delivering his own death sentence. Now he is trapped by the machinations of a cruel enemy and by his own honor. So without further ado, here's my chat with Ronn Sutton about drawing his 200th episode of Carson of Venus and more. So Ronn Sutton, thank you very much for taking time to chat with me.
So, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah, we haven't chatted in a while, so it's great to catch up and see what you're doing. But before I get to all the questions, I would like to know, what are you reading today?
Well, I still don't buy any new comics. So everything that I'm reading is old stuff, mostly reprints. The most delightful thing I've come across recently, and I'm not going to know the exact name of it, is a book that just came out collecting all of Al Williamson's Atlas stories. It's put up by Fantagraphics. It's a large size book. It's like around 11, 17 inches, 400 pages, and it reprints all 97 stories that he drew or worked on for Atlas in the 1950s, which are mostly a lot of Westerns, but a lot of science fiction stories too. Other stuff I've recently been reading too is I got a book, I think it's called The Illustrator's Prince Valiant Special, which is a limited edition of 1,000 hardcovers, and it's articles about Hal Foster, of course, but all the other artists that have worked on Prince Valiant over the years. And ultimately, there's an interview with Mark Schultz and Thomas Yates, who are the current guys that have been working on Prince Valiant for about the last 12 or 13 years. So that, and I bought myself a bunch of old 1930s Big Little books, 3 of Flash Gordon and 1 of Jungle Jim, all illustrated, well, illustrated by Alex Raymond, but basically what it is, it's text on one side of the page, and the other side of the page are just very poor panel reproductions from the various Flash Gordon and Jungle Jim strips. So
wow.
That's, yeah.
That's quite a bit. And these are reprints, right? Not originals.
The Big Little books are the originals from, 1936 to around 1943 or something, I think is the range. I bought the Jungle Jim book, which I think is 1936. And then the 3 Flash Gordons came together as a set, and it was a really good deal, so I jumped for it.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, that's great art for sure. And just going back to Prince Valiant, that was pretty influential in its time, right? It's still, to this day, it's still influencing creators.
It's still very influential, yes. Thomas Yates continues to be one of my top 5 favorite artists. It's always been beautifully drawn, and Fantagraphics, again, did, I don't know, they're 14 by 11 or something, soft trade paperback reprints through the 80s and 90s, I guess. and reprinted all of Hal Foster's run. And they're now reprinting them again in hardcovers, and they're much better quality because they're actually reproducing directly from Hal Foster's own set of proofs. This stuff is unbelievably well drawn. I mean, most people don't look at that work anymore, but people like Frank Frazetta and Al Williamson considered Hal Foster the very best.
Yeah, and speaking of big news, I got to congratulate you on drawing your 200th episode of Carson of Venus for Edgar Rice Burroughs Incorporated. So, got to ask you, what does this achievement mean to you?
Well, first of all, thank you. It's a big deal because, I mean, I've been working with the Edgar Rice Burroughs people now for 9 years. 9 years come this June. And, I mean, I started out, I did The Man-Eater, which was 150 episodes, weekly episodes, in order to completely adapt the 1915 novel. Somebody else was drawing the Carson of Venus strip, and I'd always wanted to draw Carson of Venus. I sort of discovered Carson of Venus sort of backwards. I didn't read the books until later. What first got me interested was when DC in the 1972 and 1973 had the Edgar Rice Burroughs license, and Joe Kubert was drawing Tarzan, and they were doing a number of different books. And of course, Michael William Kaluta was drawing Carson of Venus as little, I think, 8-page stories. And it was just outstanding work. It was outstanding work then. It's outstanding work now. And I wanted to draw Carson of Venus. I mean, I wanted to be Carson of Venus, but I would have settled for drawing him. I ended up doing a lot of fanzine drawings of Carson of Venus that were published in a number of places. Media 5 out of London, Ontario was one of them that did a big tabloid size page reproducing all these different drawings of Carson I'd done. So I'm the fourth artist working on Carson of Venus. And when I'm trying to remember this correctly, I think it was when the second artist left, I contacted the Burroughs people, and I'd already been doing Man-Eater. I said, I really, really want to draw Carson of Venus. And they said no, for whatever reason. I was quite upset about it, actually. I almost wanted to quit the Man-Eater, and I thought, don't do that, cutting off your nose to spite your face. But what I decided I was going to do was I sat down and I drew some samples, and I actually went ahead and had Becca Kinsey, who was coloring the Man-Eater, color the first Carson of Venus strip. And by the time I got the second one finished and she had colored it, the then current artist, which I guess was the third one at that point, decided to quit. So there I was, and I had my samples in hand, and so they said, yes, go ahead. So when I took over Carson of Venus, it was really quite mundane because all the buildings were very blocky looking. Carson was literally wearing a T-shirt and Lycra bicycle shorts. The women were all wearing sort of like two-piece bikinis. The swords that a lot of the people were using were broadswords. And I thought, this is not what Edgar Rice Burroughs is about at all. I mean, Edgar Rice Burroughs is about shining towers with turrets, and sort of architecture that's mildly influenced by Art Deco and Art Nouveau. The women are wearing, long flowing gowns. The men all have sabers, and really started trying to amp up the romance and adventure. Taking an eye, back to the old pulp magazines and taking a look at all the original illustrations for Burroughs and trying to capture a lot of that feeling. Today, I literally finished my 196th strip, so it's 4 weeks away from hitting number 200. It's been a long haul. It's a lot of pages, and I've been really knocking myself out on this stuff, and I'm trying to make it as Burroughs-ish as I possibly can, Forget what the scientists told you about Venus being so hot nothing could live there. They're lying to us. We all know that Venus has got pink skies, and it has, purple foliage, and there's wild creatures, multicolored creatures, and there's women running around half naked, and there's guys running around half naked, and they've got swords, and he's got a pistol. He's got the only pistol on the planet. He's got the only airplane on the planet. I mean, it's just wonderful adventure stuff.
Yeah, so definitely an adventure.
Yeah, high adventure, and that's what I'm really aiming at. I'm sort of keeping pulp magazines in the back of my mind and keeping Errol Flynn in the back of my mind, and trying to make it very swashbuckling.
That's it, for sure. Now, pardon my ignorance, but would you say you're the longest running artist with 200 episodes, or someone else had a longer stretch than you?
I am the artist that has drawn more Carson of Venus pages than anybody at this point.
Wow, that's an achievement.
Yeah, the strip itself right now is the one I just finished today is number 384. Okay, so I mean, almost 200 of those are mine, which means 184 were split between the three previous artists. The very first artist did 100 pages, and the next two guys did about 44 each.
Right.
But also, Michael William Kaluta did those wonderful, wonderful, wonderful Carson pages for DC in the early 70s. And I think he did 89 pages. And then, of course, since then, Dark Horse has done some miniseries, and American Mythology has done a number of miniseries. But I think the artists working on those, I think, they've done maybe at maximum like 120 pages, maybe 140 pages at absolute maximum. At
Wow.
200, I've drawn more Carson of Venus artwork than anybody.
Definitely, yeah. And you're not standing still, because I understand you have another project in the works with writer Ron Mars. I wonder if you could talk a wee bit about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm 72 years old and been doing this for over 50 years now, probably closer to 55 years. I don't want to slow down. I'm doing exactly what I want to do at the moment. This is exactly the kind of work I want to do, and I'm very picky about what other work I'm taking in. I thought, I really want to do a second Burroughs story. And of course, what got me involved with Burroughs Incorporated in the first place was Tarzan, because Thomas Greenberg was leaving, and I was trying to get the strip. Roy Thomas was writing it, and that just didn't pan out. And then I ended up doing The Man-Eater, and now I'm doing Carson. I started looking at some of the other strips that had been running on the weekly Edgar Rice Burroughs strip, and for some reason, the Korak the Killer strip sort of stopped after, I think, 40 or 41 episodes, something like that, and had just been sitting dormant for a few years. So I decided to write Ron Mars, who was the writer, and say, what happened? Did the artist quit, or did you quit, or, what happened? And he said, oh, yeah, the other artist is done at this point. And he said he'd love to have it going again. So I contacted the Burroughs people once again, with some samples. And they said, yeah, go for it. So we don't have a lot done so far, because it's just been really slow. The scripts have been coming in much slower than I would like them to be. But Korak the Killer, of course, Korak is Tarzan's son. Yeah. And this is sort of funny to me, actually. The strip is called Korak the Killer. In the ape language that Burroughs created, Korak means killer. So, in fact, the strip is either called Korak the Killer, or it's called Killer the Killer, or it's called Korak the Korak.
Right.
Which sort of amuses me. Korak only appeared really in one single novel by Edgar Rice Burroughs, and that was Son of Tarzan, which I think was around the fourth or fifth Tarzan novel. And the whole novel is about Korak and how he meets his true love, Miriam. And he does get mentioned in some of the other books, but Son of Tarzan is the only book that's truly about Korak until recently. And Edgar Rice Burroughs Incorporated, sort of expanding the herb universe, just a couple of years ago, put out a book that was written by Win Scott Eckert, which is a brand new Korak novel. And then, of course, again, Russ Manning was drawing for Gold Key, the Korak comic book, for a long time. Really, it was kind of like all speculation. I mean, because the source material is one single novel. I have a lot of fun with it.
That's good. That's good. And I can't believe this, but you still have time for yet another project, a romance strip written by Eisner Hall of Fame legend Barbara Friedlander. I mean, how do you find time for this? And can you tell me a little bit more about that project?
Yeah, well, it's actually finished at this point.
Oh, wow.
It took me a long time to draw. It was only 16 pages, but I was trying to fit it in between other things, and it hasn't come out yet. It's supposed to be in a comic, which I think is going to be a one-shot called Another Time, Another Place. And as you noted, it was written by Barbara Friedlander, who used to be editor and writer for the DC romance comics in the 1960s. And the story I've got takes place in the 1920s, and it's all about a flapper who's sort of hanging out and trying to make her way into higher society. through a little bit of luck and what have you, she ends up sort of doing so and ends up falling in love with a chauffeur who actually is missing one eye. He has an eye patch, and he was viciously injured during the First World War and has no memory. And of course, at the end of the story, it turns out he gets his memory. As they're getting married, he gets his memory back, and turns out, I'll save
Right.
the end for the comic. The pages are very designy, and I spent a lot of time trying to get, again, a real Art Deco feeling in the design on the pages. And I was meticulously trying to get all the clothing right, because she's a flapper. So that's fun to draw, So there's actually one page that's got a drawing that's across the top of the page. It's got a chorus line of flapper girls dancing. I think there's like 10 or 12 of them. So that was a fun challenge to do. And so I'm hoping that's coming out fairly soon. I've got to contact Ken Wheaton, who's the person that's putting this thing together. So
Yeah, something to look forward to for sure.
Yeah.
Now, on this podcast, I don't like to dwell on negative topics, but as we've all heard, there's growing concern about tariffs and how people are saying we got to buy more Canadian products. So I wanted to ask you, because last time we were talking about supplies and art supplies, and I want to ask you, how does this new wave of thinking about buying Canadian impact you when you're trying to buy your art supplies?
Yeah, like everybody else, like every other Canadian, I'm sort of going into the supermarket and scrutinizing everything, that I'm buying, purposely not buying anything that's American. With art supplies, it's difficult because, I'm not going to brick and mortar art stores anymore. I'm ordering stuff in now. And I've been recently dealing with a place called Above Ground in Toronto, which is on McCall Street, which is near the College of Art and the Art Gallery. So I placed an order just actually a couple of weeks ago, $300 worth of art supplies. And that was tracing pads, that was art boards, a lot of Pitt pens, and some rolls of white presentation tape. Wasn't even thinking about it when I ordered the stuff, and when it arrived, I sort of thought, I didn't check to see if any of this stuff was Canadian made or if it was American made. Turns out I think the Pitt pens are, from Germany, but I'm not sure. It turns out both the pads were American made. Now, this puts me kind of in an odd position because I don't know what to do. I don't know what the alternative is for I'm not aware of Canadian art supply manufacturers making these products. I think I'll start investigating that by the next time I have to order art supplies. But this whole situation, it's been affecting me. I'm not doing any U.S. shows at all for sure, any U.S. conventions. That sort of breaks my heart because last year I went to Pulp Fest, which was in Mars, Pennsylvania. It was a very small show. It was all pulp magazine collectors primarily, but they were also having their ERB Fest, their Edgar Rice Burroughs Festival. So the heads of Edgar Rice Burroughs were there, so I got to meet 2 of the 3 head people from there. Got to talk to Mark Schultz again, which was very pleasant. I had the best time I've had at a convention in decades. I sold more artwork that single show than I have in like the last 8 or 9 shows combined.
Wow.
Previously. Yeah. This was my people for sure. I just had a wonderful, wonderful time. And I was really looking forward to going back this year. And now I'm going, no, I don't think I want to cross the border.
Right. That is a concern. I'm hopeful that things will turn around. But that is a good point that you raise about, should Canada be making its own materials, its own supplies? And certainly when it comes to creativity, I think that's maybe where some companies should step up and address that. It's going to be a challenge, I think, in the short term. But yeah, trying to find stuff locally is, that's the whole beauty of trading and importing from different places. You can get a variety of different tools and that complement what work you're doing. And if you have to make trade-offs to buy Canadian, that's where, hopefully art won't suffer because of it, but it'll certainly be affected. That's for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm not sure. I'm going to keep my eye open next time I'm ordering supplies and see if there is an alternative, but I suspect there probably is not. At which point, I guess I will have to buy some American stuff. I think we're all going to have to buy some American stuff. But, together, as a unit, I think we can avoid buying as much as possible.
It sounds like you've got a lot going on, and I know that there's been some activity that you've been going to at least some Canadian shows. So
Yeah.
for people who want to find out more about what you've got going on, doing shows and events and stuff like that, where do you recommend people go online to find out more about you?
Of course, there's my website. It's not the huge website it used to be. It's sort of been changed over and it's still in development. It's kind of very primary at the moment, but my website is ronnsutton.com, www.ronnsutton.com. The shows I've got coming up actually is I've got May 24th. I'm doing the Capital Comic Con here in Ottawa, which is a one-day show. In June 13 and 14, we're going out to Moncton, New Brunswick, both Janet and I, for the East Coast Comic Expo. And then, of course, in September 5th and 7th, we'll be doing the Ottawa Comic Con. Other than that, I don't have any other shows planned at the moment. So.
Right. Sounds like you've got a lot going on. I'm wondering, Ron, is there anything else I didn't ask you that you'd think would be important for this conversation?
As you say, I got a lot going on. One of the things that came out of going to Pulp Fest last year was I ended up doing a book cover for a book called Pulp Reality, which is a book of an anthology of original short pulp fiction. So I did the cover for that, and my friend Jeff Isherwood digitally painted it afterwards. And I'm still doing my portraits of comic book artists for Comic Book Creator magazine. A few weeks back, I finished my portrait of Thomas Yates for, I think, issue number 39. And I'm just starting on a portrait of Dave Stevens, which I think is like my 39th or 40th portrait so far. So other than that covers it, I'm just a busy little guy.
Thanks to Ron for the chat. You can discover more about Ronn Sutton at ronnsutton.com and on facebook.com/ron.sutton. And thank you for tuning in to the True North Country Comics podcast. I invite you to visit the True North Country Comics website to listen to even more conversations with creators about their insight on making comic books and graphic novels. I encourage you to subscribe via the website so you'll be notified about new podcast interviews and article posts. This podcast is available wherever podcasts are enjoyed. Please like, follow, and subscribe. You can follow along True North Country Comics on most social media sites, and you're encouraged to send any and all feedback to John at truenorthcountrycomics.com. Thanks for tuning in, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now. True North Country Comics Podcast is copyright True North Country Comics, copyright 2025.